So today we are at Queen's Park in the Premier's office with the Premier Doug Ford. Hello and welcome to BDC.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Premier, it's an honor to interview you. If you look back at 2019, what do you think your government's achievements are?
Well, our single largest achievement, we have quite a few of them, but one is there's 271,600 families that are working now that weren't working a year and 5 months ago before we got elected. Matter of fact, the previous government lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Our economy is absolutely booming right now, and that's 271,000 more people that can pay rent, can pay a mortgage, can go out, maybe go out for a dinner or do things they might otherwise not be able to do. And that drives the economy. We also gave tax breaks to the smallest companies in the country that employ in excess of over 80% of the people. We cut their taxes 8.75%. We gave free dental for 100,000 seniors. There's a list of, we could go on and on and on. We passed 21 pieces of legislation, which is a record in our first year. And that sets the groundwork and the foundation for years 2, 3, 4, and 5 that we're going to balance the deficit. I just want to remind everyone, when we came into office, it was a financial disaster. We inherited a $15 billion deficit in the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world, $347 billion. And the taxpayers are paying $13 billion a year just on interest on servicing that debt, which is our fourth largest line item. So we're paying down the deficit. We have it down to $9 billion. We're spending more on healthcare, $1.9 billion more than any government in the history of Canada. We're spending more on education, $1.2 billion, again more than any other government. And the economy right now is absolutely booming. Our biggest challenge with the economy right now, we need more people to come to Ontario. We're short about 250,000 people to fill the jobs that we have, and that's what happens. Economics is very easy. You cut red tape and regulations on companies, you reduce their taxes. They will reinvest it into equipment, into technology, into their people. And then when you put more money into people's pockets, they'll go out and spend it and get the economy going. And since we've done that, we've seen an additional $1.6 billion of new revenues up to Queen's Park's bank account, as they call it, the taxpayers' bank account. So you can do more things when you lower taxes. But as soon as you start raising taxes on companies and on people, the companies will leave, which they did under the previous administration, and people will stop spending. And then all of a sudden you see a downturn in the economy. But right now we're leading North America in economic development and job creation. So our economy's on fire right now, which is great.
As you mentioned, you work for the betterment of Ontarians, reduce taxes, red tape reduction. But if you look at the opposition, they say the Ford government is focused more on cost cutting.
Well, we disagree. If you look at the figures, we're actually spending more than the previous government. We're just finding efficiencies. They were spending $40 million a day more than they were taking in. And you look at your own household budget. If you spend more than what you take in, it doesn't last too long. You're in debt, you could lose your house. Here, they just continued spending, and it's not feasible to do that. So we're spending more on healthcare than any government, more on education, and the economy's booming. So, well, last month you saw right across the country, jobs decreased. In Ontario, jobs increased.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. But if you look at certain points, say about the education cuts,
Yeah.
the strikes, 2-day strikes happen, and the third is announced for tomorrow. It's discrepancy between compensation and offer.
Yeah.
What is it that's not working? Is it too much about money than the students?
Well, first of all, there's no education cuts. There's $1.2 billion more being spent than the previous government. This is all about compensation. They go through this with every government, all the way back to Bob Rae and the NDP. Every single government, no matter if it's NDP, PC, or Liberal, they do the same thing. I differentiate between the hardworking men and women, the teachers on the front lines that want to do a good job, they want to be in the classroom, versus the head of their unions. Their head of the unions want to go through this every 3 to 4 years, put families in turmoil because they don't know if their kids are staying home, put the economy in turmoil. That's unfortunate. We want a fair deal for the taxpayers and the teachers. and the students and the parents. So we want to make sure the kids get in school, be taught properly, and they're more worried about that compensation. We're already giving them a raise of $750 million. Our teachers do a great job. They're the second highest paid teachers in the entire country. Yes. They have a phenomenal pension plan, better than anyone in the country. By the way, you and I are paying for that pension plan. And again, with their health plan and everything, you know, they work hard, they get compensated very well, but there has to be a point when the whole province is in debt. Everyone is getting 1%, everyone across the board. Why should the teachers get double that? They want an additional $750 million. We just don't have the money, and they have to feel the pressures like everyone else. They have incredible jobs, and I appreciate the job they do. But the taxpayers I'm talking to when I'm going across the province, every single person comes up to me and says, "Keep going. Don't give in to the teachers." They do it every single year, every 3 years to us. It's not fair to the public.
Okay, let's come to healthcare. We know the first health team has been announced, which work in Brampton and Etobicoke. And even when the premier meeting was held in the beginning of December, all the premiers decided to ask for more funding from the federal government and opt out from National Pharmacare. But what about Hallway Healthcare? You promised to end that, but we don't see anything happening in that.
So we're working on Hallway Healthcare. There's approximately about 1,000 people in the hallways right now. We're chipping away at that. We want to put in proper systems, lean systems. I went up to Vaughan the other day, yesterday actually, and I went up to their new hospital. And in their old hospital, they're telling me they have no longer than 20-minute wait. And my question to them is, why don't we take your methodologies, your ideas, and apply them in all other hospitals? Because it's just the process that people are following. And if we find something that works, implement it right across the board. The biggest problem is when the EMS drops off a patient, they want to get back on the road. Well, they aren't able to. They're sitting there with the patient. Up in Vaughan, they've come up with a creative way of making sure the patient gets unloaded and the EMS are back on the streets. So we're working at every single angle possible. We're looking at long-term care beds because a tremendous amount of beds are taken up by people that should be in long-term care or should be somewhere else. But they're in hospital beds that cost 3 times as much. So we're working on creating 15,000 new long-term care beds. We're a little over 7,000 already, and then we're going to create another 15,000 long-term care beds. It's in desperate need, but the healthcare system, we're working with the doctors. They're coming up with ideas because I always believe no one understands their job better than the frontline people, be it doctors or nurses. And they've given us some ideas, but they all agree there's better ways of delivering healthcare than the way we've been doing it for the last 15 years.
But leave Mississauga, leave Georgetown. If we look at the Brampton, as the population of Brampton is going day by day, do you think only this long-term care beds or the more beds they will address the problem?
I think Brampton, because I lived in Brampton for 5 years, and I saw the growth, and the growth is exceeding, you know, the healthcare right now. Eventually. It may not be tomorrow, but eventually they're going to need an additional hospital if they continue seeing the growth that we see in Brampton. I think it's any town or city that's growing that rapidly, the resources have to keep up to it, be it infrastructure, hospitals, policing. And so we have a sharp eye on Brampton to help the people of Brampton.
Premier, as you mentioned, the Ontario is on track to meet its emission targets by 2030.
Yes.
But if you look at the statement of Auditor General, they say that Ontario doesn't have a sound evidence to prove that.
Well, I appreciate the Auditor General, and she's part of the team. I wish I had 10 Auditor Generals to go in there and find inefficiencies. In this case, this is about the environment. Our plan was a great plan. It's working. And I don't know how someone can predict 10 years out when it's evolving constantly. What the Auditor General didn't take into consideration, our announcement with the SMRs, which are called small modular reactors. which is going to be incredible over the next 10 years, 0 emissions. What the Auditor General didn't take into plan, the tens of thousands of cars that are coming off the roads when we get our $28 billion transit plan up and going. They left transit here for 30, 40 years without building anything. Our government's doubling the size of transit right now, the largest transit project in North America. We're putting $28 billion into a transit plan. Therefore, people will get out of their cars and use transit. So I guess the Auditor General is not taking certain things into consideration. But what I don't believe in is taxing people. A fake tax and call it a carbon tax, it's terrible. Prices of gas will go up, make it unaffordable. Groceries will go up. Everything in the province will go up for what? To go into a secret bank account up in Ottawa? That they get to spend it on whatever they want? Our plan goes after the large emitters and tackles them. We're focusing on making sure we have clean air, clean lakes, clean parks, clean rivers. That's what people care about, and we're doing a great job. We're leading the country.
So you believe it, Ontario is on track?
We're leading the country, and we're on track. In 10 years, we have 7.5% to make up. That's not too much.
Moving on to the last topic, human trafficking.
Yes.
You promised a strategy to combat the problem of human trafficking, and you announced $20 million funding in that. How will this funding help?
Well, the 20 million is rolling out as we speak. But what frustrates me is they get caught, these criminals that are abusing children, and it starts at 13 years of age, and they get a slap on the wrist, and they get out on bail the next day. Someone that does that to anyone, they need to be thrown in jail, and for a long time, to deter other people, because if not, they'll just go out and do it again. So I believe the federal government has to reform the judicial system, and that goes for guns and gangs too. You can't have people committing crimes and then getting a slap on the wrist, and they walk out there laughing at the public. We need to strengthen the bail conditions. We have to strengthen the judicial system. We're way too soft on criminals that cause problems in our community. 99.9% of the people want a safe neighborhood. We can't have people running around with guns and trafficking young children. That's unacceptable.
Well, Premier, thank you so much for
Thank
talking
you.
to us. We
Thank
wish you
you.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone and all your listeners. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice
That's
to meet you.
great.